Okay.
You good now? Is it good?
Either way.
Okay, so we are the secondary science group. My name is Dylan Oman.
I'm Crystal Seeley.
Brock Reynolds. Caleb McDowell.
Alec O'Neill.
And our presentation is called The Evolution of Genetics. And so I'm going to start with what genetics is, and based on its name, it is the study of genes. It's a pretty clever name they got there. So in humans, what makes up humans is 23 pairs of chromosomes. You can see in the 23rd pair there are 2 sections. That's what makes the difference between males and females, is the 23rd pair. So males will have one Y chromosome, one X chromosome, and females will have 2 X chromosomes. And that's about the only difference between a male and a female that is genetic. So, but what can happen is there are defects, and some of the most common ones are Down syndrome, which is caused by trisomy 21, which means there are 3 of the 21st chromosome instead of just 2. So what happens when someone has trisomy 21 is their life expectancy is shorter, and they have facial features that you can tell that they have this. And then another common one is Edwards syndrome, which is caused by trisomy 13, which is an extra 13th chromosome, And babies that have this rarely are carried to full term. Most end in miscarriages. And the ones that do get birth, only 5% of them actually live past their first year. Which is pretty bad. So then you also hear we're like 99% related to monkeys, anything. With pigs, 84%. So like all the A's, T's, C's, and G's in a line that you'd see if you get your blood tested, and they check your whole genome, 84% similar to a pig. But with a monkey, they say 99, like people will tell you 99, but it's about 96%.
Alright, now I'm going to introduce you guys to a guy named Gregor Mendel, or the father of modern genetics. He was an Austrian priest, and he bred up pea plants. So what made him start doing his research was he noticed that if you had a yellow plant and a green plant and you bred them together, then there would always be a green plant in the next generation. But then if you went one generation past that, yellow would reappear somehow. And he went out to try and figure out what was causing that. So from 1856 to 1863, he tested around 28,000 plants. And here were the 7 observable variables that he was able to see in his own work. So what he started finding out from all of this, he turned into the laws of inheritance. So law of segregation, during gamete formation, the alleles for each gene segregates from each other so that each gamete carries only one allele for each gene. Independent assortment, genes for different traits can segregate independently during the formation of gametes. And law of dominance, some alleles are dominant while others are recessive. An organism with at least one dominant allele will then display the effects of the dominant. So there's a lot of words, and I went through the effort of simplifying it. So essentially the 3 things he came up with break down to each parent passes on half of a trait. The traits assign one at a time, regardless of what happens before them, and the dominant versus recessive. So an illustration of that at work would be here on this. So on that chart, everything on the top row is dominant with the red marker, and everything on the bottom is recessive. So as you can see here, whenever 2 get together, the dominant one completely overtakes it, even though there's one of each. And then to accurately portray the next generation after that, you would have to show this box diagram that has become a lot more popularized since Mendel's days. And he was right on as far as we can tell. However, back in the day, it took a couple of decades before people started advancing on his work. Because scientists at the time believed in blending inheritance, where if you had a tall guy and a short girl, then you'd have a kid right in the middle somewhere. They just thought everything was averaged out. And another thing that historians consider to be unfortunate is that he lived right alongside Charles Darwin, but they never once met each other. And in Charles Darwin's theories, the genetics was definitely the weakest point of it. That was where he's most heavily criticized because he wasn't quite right. There's a lot of theorizing on what possibly could have happened if Mendel and Charles Darwin started working together.
So we're going to go through one of his experiments. Basically, again, he worked with pea plants, and then phenotype is the word in genetics used to describe the outward appearance of something. So for instance, in this parent generation, the phenotype would be a yellow pea plant, and the other one's phenotype is a green pea plant. Okay, we're going to do the Punnett square, so this is what your handout is for. So if you can all grab a pencil or a pen, please. We're going to work on the first one together, and the second one I'm going to have you do on your own. Okay, so I'm giving you, both parents are heterozygous green pea pods. So heterozygous means they have different alleles. One allele is going to be dominant, and one allele is recessive. So big G represents green, small g represents yellow, and that's our recessive. So you're going to write, each parent gives one allele. So I'm going to put them on the top. This is one parent. They can either give the big G allele or they can give the small g allele. The second parent goes on the side. Same thing, they can give either the allele for green color or the allele for yellow color. Now what you're going to do is carry the top letters down and write it in each box. So the capital letters are dominant, and they always are the first one in the box. Do the same with the second parent, except you write them across. So if I look at the two parents, they were heterozygous, so they were green, and they could produce, if you look at it, dominant means you need one allele for that trait to show up. So as long as they have one big G, they're guaranteed to be a green pea pod plant. So this one's green, this one still has one big G, so it's green, one big G, and this one, two small G's, so that one's recessive. Any questions on the Punnett square? I wrote some directions on the handout if you have a question on it. Okay, so your next example, this one you're going to do on your own. One parent's heterozygous, so again, one allele is green, one is yellow, and the other one is homozygous, so they're the same allele. I've set up the parents for you. I'd like you to take the minute and do it on your own. Okay, if you're done, check with the person near you, see how yours compare. See if we're remembering our Punnett squares well. Okay, hopefully yours looks like this. So again, I carry down the G's from the top and then from the side. So can anyone tell me what are the odds that this offspring would have recessive color, so would be yellow? What are the chances?
50-50.
50-50, yes. Because 2 of these squares out of 4 are GG, which is recessive. So it's a 50% chance. Which if you've ever heard someone say, for instance, oh, they have 3 girls, they're hoping for a boy, they still have a 50-50 chance that it's going to be a girl. Just because you had 3 before it doesn't matter. Okay, so critical thinking questions for you. If a trait is recessive, do you think that trait will be less common? And does having a recessive trait for a gene automatically disadvantage the individual? So turn to a partner and talk that over for like 2 minutes, and then I'm going to ask on 2 partners to share their answer.
Good job, partner.
I don't really know why.
I think over time, recessive traits can be lost. But I think that makes hemophilia is recessive. That would be a minimum.
It's like underneath.
Okay, who has an idea?
You said that if a trait is recessive, it's going to be less common just because the chances are, like it showed on the Punnett squares, at least it's less likely to show up. And then since it's a recessive trait, it doesn't give you a disadvantage because blue eyes is a recessive trait. And just because you have blue eyes doesn't mean you're going to die sooner than someone with like brown eyes. So there's no disadvantage because you have that recessive trait.
Okay, I like that you use the Punnett square as one of your reasons of evidence. I challenge you, what if there was a high amount of people with that recessive trait to begin with? So instead of starting with like heterozygous populations, it was had a homozygous recessive parent.
Then it'll be more common.
Did anyone else? What's another idea we have?
I guess we also thought that it would be more common just because it only requires, well, because it requires both parents to give the same one. So whereas the dominant only requires one allele. But if both parents only have, I mean, if they have the non-dominant gene, then that means that they have both alleles are non-dominant, so they will pass off the non-dominant regardless. So therefore it might be just as common to have the non-dominant gene, if that makes any sense.
It's really tricky. Like you, I would think
Yeah.
because of the Punnett square that automatically, well, if you have to have 2, it should be less common. But then if you look at certain areas like Ireland and Scotland with red hair, and with red hair, that's recessive, but it's higher frequency there just because of the population's makeup. So anyone else have another answer for the disadvantage? The blue eyes was a great one. Maybe another example of that.
I struggle with that.
I think, I know it only affects guys, but I think, or mostly, hemophilia is a recessive trait, so I think it really depends on the trait as to whether or not it'd be a disadvantage.
I would agree. Yeah, and there could be a trait that's a disadvantage, but what if your environment suddenly changes, and all of a sudden, what was a disadvantage for you is a benefit? So it could depend on your environment too, and definitely on the trait. Excellent.
Alrighty guys, so I'm going to take it over now. So we're going to be talking about natural selection, which is basically building off the title of our slide, which is the evolution of genetics. So how do genes evolve? Where do they come from? How do they change? So I'm going to be talking about natural selection, mutation, as well as migration. So natural selection basically is a basic mechanism for evolution. So what it basically says is genes that are not dominant and don't help a species survive are not going to get passed on. And then genes that get a species killed are not going to get passed on as well. So it's just, it's nature. Birds are going to go after a smaller beetle, or snakes are going to eat a rat that stands out more. So. Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Look the same. Okay, so here's for example, okay? So there is variation in traits, so some beetles are green and some are brown. There's differential reproduction, which means in this example, green beetles tend to be eaten by birds more than the brown ones. So why is this? Well, the green beetles tend to be smaller and they stand out more. They're shiny, they have a metallic coat. And there's heredity, so brown beetles produce more brown beetles. It's genetically what's encoded in them. So the end result is these big brown beetles are going to survive more than the green ones. One, because they camouflage more, and the birds just don't notice them. So, okay, so where do these new genes come from? Where did the brown beetles originate from? Well, that's where these mutations or mistakes happen. So for example, this seahorse over here had a genetic mutation where it grew extra limbs. And so it ended up looking like seaweed, so it blended in more. So you guys are all familiar with mutations. You've probably had a family member, a friend, or known somebody who has cancer, right? Well, that's a genetic mutation as well, but sometimes it works in their favor. So this beetle down here grew a bigger butt and looked more like a spider, so a venomous spider, so therefore predators aren't going to want to eat it. This is a monarch butterfly, so most of us are familiar with those. Those are big, beautiful orange butterflies. Well, this one happened to live in a rocky gray area, and its genetic mutation allowed it to be gray, so it survived more than those other bright orange butterflies, so that one's going to survive and get its genes passed on. And it happens with plants too. So the flower over here, one of its petals actually looked like a moth, a female moth to be exact. So all the other male moths are going to try to mate with this flower, and in turn spread its pollen around. So that flower is going to survive. Okay, so now I have an activity for you, so it's your turn. So we're going to look at 3 different spiders. So these spiders are all from the same family, the same kind of spider, same species, okay? So first of all, we're going to look at their environment here. They live in a forest that has 4 seasons, just like we do. It rains quite a bit there, okay? Nice and green and lush in the summer and spring though. So here's one of their predators, is a bird with a long beak, okay? So that long beak is key here. Another predator is lizards. There's lizards all over the floor. So our first spider here is a medium-sized spider. It's furry, it's white, but its web is in between the trees. So if we were to take these 2 trees, for example, its web would be in between there. Second spider is quite a bit bigger. It's very fast, but its web is underground. So they burrow underneath them. That's where their web is, okay? The last spider is very small, but it camouflages. So when it's green, it can hide more. And its web is actually in the tree itself, so in the branches here. So look for key things like, well, this spider's white, so it snows. Maybe it can camouflage in the winter. It doesn't even survive in the winter. This spider's big and brown. The ground floor is brown. And this one can easily hide in the leaves. So turn to your neighbor, discuss it for a bit, and talk about why you think one spider will survive and one won't.
Number 2.
The bird has a long
All right, guys, let's hear it. What do you guys think?
Spider 3.
Spider 3, let's hear it. Why?
It's small, webs in the tree,
Okay.
and it's camouflage, so it's surrounded.
Okay. It doesn't have that big furry coat the other 2 have for the winter, right? When it rains, it can flush that spider right out of the tree, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But I like what you said. Who else? You guys just love spiders.
Number 2,
Number 2, let's hear it.
because it's brown, so it's always going to be camouflage.
Okay.
It has the fur for the winter.
Yep.
And that's all I got.
What about all these lizards all over the floor, though?
They're not scared of the lizards.
They're not
They
scared of
can run away.
lizard? All right.
But
There we go.
the birds also have the long beaks, which can go underground and get them
Correct.
in there.
Yeah, that's right. Did anyone say spider number 1? Poor little snowball. Yeah, I think he's probably gonna die.
Not unless they mistake him, like, if his web's between the trees and it rains, then the web is going to hold water drops.
Yeah.
Which could either camouflage it by being the same color, or if the birds pick up on it, they're gonna come by and find them immediately and eat them.
Absolutely. So this would be an example of a genetic mutation. So this spider perhaps came out albino, and it stands out. It's not going to survive. So on the back of your guys' piece of paper is where you'll write your response to this, as well as a little explanation, and you'll turn that in at the end. Okay. So go ahead and take a few seconds to write that down, and then we'll switch over to Brock.
Are you going to tell us who's going to survive?
It's number 2. Yep. Yeah, your little green bean is gonna die.
So are we supposed to be honest or say number 2?
Yeah, we're supposed to
Yeah, that's right what you thought. That says number 2. There's no wrong answer as long as you explain it.
It's a dangerous.
Participation.
Alright, cool, I'll take over from here. So I wanted to bring this all together. I'm like kind of weird dog people, so this is my dog, he was helping me make my presentation. We're pretty sure he's golden retriever and corgi mixed together. And I always watch him because he's got this kind of funny personality. So not only does he look physically like a golden retriever and a corgi, but he behaves like this. He likes to retrieve things. He also tends to like to like herd our other dog around a lot. So they got the dogs over there, upper right hand corner, and the big one actually does whatever little one says. So I just thought that kind of hammered down the genetics aspect of it for me. So I kind of got to this dog kick on this guy, but humans domesticated dogs around 10,000 years ago. That was right around the time where we were hunter-gatherers, and wolves would tend to follow human packs around. When they would follow us, they would eat our leftovers. So that led to probably a human getting a cub at some point, and now they're about 98% wolf, but dogs are still really, really close. So there was this experiment done, and I have a video on this later, but I don't know if I'll show it today. They took red foxes, and they bred them for docility, and for just no hostility towards people. So they found that within 3 generations, dogs, or the red foxes, actually chilled out. They started to physically look more like puppies. They kind of have more of like man, my wife told me the word for it, I can't remember it right now, but they have more of an adolescent look. They never developed really a full adult look to them. So corn. I don't know if you guys are familiar. So corn in the upper left here, that's actually what the natural plant looks like. It's a weed that grows down in the southern to mid hemisphere. And we selectively bred it to the point now where it looks like it does. That's genetic engineering. We've just been doing it really slowly over time. So this is something I thought was pretty cool. This is how they actually genetically engineer plants. I'll go into who does it here in a minute, but they take this thing called a gene gun and they actually blast it with helium. They used to do it with a 22 caliber bullet, essentially, and they blast this genetic material right down here, and then they reconstitute it from that genetic material that grows. So that's how they actually get a gene to go within a plant. There's another method they can do with humans that I just found out about yesterday called the CRISPR method, and they unzip DNA, and then they can take a living person without actually doing it prenatally, and they can get them to stop expressing certain genes. They're hoping to cure Crohn's disease down the road. I forget what was one of them. And there are other diseases that are genetically based. But I don't know, I just thought this was kind of neat to show how it actually works. These guys. Monsanto. Have you guys heard of these guys before? These guys pretty much control almost everything you eat. They're in the process right now of starting to patent genes. So they're taking the gene gun, they're blasting genes, and then they're doing some other kind of shady stuff where they're going and targeting farmers that have a neighboring field to a Monsanto field, and pollen goes in the wind, and when it travels, it actually will infect the neighboring farmers' plants, and Monsanto will then sue them for having the gene within their crop. So really nice guys. The next guy, the Ringling Brothers elephants. This is going to be the last year that the Ringling Brothers have their elephants. They're sending them to this place in Florida, this reserve, and they're specifically studying the P53 gene. So elephants don't really get cancer. It's because they make this gene that manufactures a protein that actually fights off cancer. And they also have super long telomeres. We're studying that to try to see if we can either create a drug or in the future maybe genetically modify humans to create this protein that will fight cancer. This would be the experiments, or this is the experiments in Siberia with the foxes. These are some discussion questions that I probably won't go into too much because time and you guys didn't watch the video. That's it.
All right,